This program is made possible in part by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider this, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bales Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hi, and welcome back to UNO. Immigration has been a major concern since September 11th of last year, and it involves national security to a higher extent than ever, given what immigrants, some people that came into our country, did in New York and Washington, and to a plane that landed in Pennsylvania. My guest this week is Jerry Hienauer. He's District Director of the Omaha Office of the Immigration and Naturalization Service. And thanks for coming.
Thank you, Carol.
And one of the reasons I asked Jerry is because in reading about Congress trying to break up the INS into a couple of services and reading about, losing students and all these things, I thought, what must it be like to work in the INS with all these probably under-budgeted, probably all these competing masters, and then even here on campus just this past week, Chuck Hagel said, we need to fix this immigration process. He says the GOP is concerned about the Latino vote and on. But I mean, it's like serving. The immigration is really being bandied about. First, though, I want to ask you about one of your most recent big operations out in I think Keith County, maybe around Oglala.
Yes.
You kind of hitched a bus.
Carol, we arrested 676 persons during a 1-week period of time in which we were basically just checking the east and westbound buses for Greyhound. I think what's very significant about that number, 676, is that it was a snapshot in time of just along I-80. We arrested 76 persons that were other than Mexican nationals, 6 people from the People's Republic of China, and you don't just happen to be on a bus transiting through the state of Nebraska if you're from the People's Republic of China. So it's very organized smuggling that's involved. We apprehended 5 persons who had outstanding warrants of arrest that we identified through our ident system, which each and every person that we arrest, we take a digital fingerprint and a photograph, and if they've ever been arrested by INS before, it lets us know that. So the operation was very successful, and I think also very telling.
When you mention the word smuggling, now obviously there are people who are just undocumented, or as we call illegal aliens is the most common term, but undocumented people. A bus would be a way of transportation, but you mentioned smuggling. There are organized, they're using the buses, and we've heard this in other news reports. Yeah. And you saw evidence of this just in this one kind of, we're going to park here and see what comes back and forth along I-80.
Yeah, I think, Carol, you had mentioned because of 9/11, and I think one of the things that's happened is smugglers have gone from the airport, where they know that there's heightened security, to using buses and other means of transportation. And yes, while we weren't able to identify specific smuggling rings or operations, we were able to provide a lot of good intelligence to the Tucson Border Patrol sector and other places where persons have recently entered the United States. And it is a fact that you don't just happen to be on a bus and making your way across the country. It's organized, and
there's a destination planned for some reason other than I'm going to visit Aunt whoever.
Exactly. Yes.
That must have been a high manpower operation. Or was it? Was it an affair?
Yeah, no, not really. It was fairly easy to put together. We had the help of some other sectors, and we had some other buses that we had en route, and we made arrangements to have JPATS, which is the Justice Prisoner Alien Transportation System, come up to send the illegals back to Mexico. But so it was somewhat labor intensive, but we were able to make sure that we had other officers in all of our offices in case something of a higher priority national emergency come up.
But that still brings to the fore that the INS is under the gun to do a better job of almost what I'd call mission impossible in some
Yes,
respects.
yeah.
And even as we speak, Congress may be deciding to break up the INS into two parts: one that would just handle people, visas and things like that, and the others that would investigate and be concerned about the illegals and the possible threat and concern. You serve so many masters all the time. I mean, you are there's a lot of big responsibilities in the INS.
You're right. Last year, our office interviewed and approved 4,000 cases for persons that were applying for permanent residence. And if you take a look at, in 1995, our office received 800 applications for people that were applying to become permanent residents. In terms of arrest, last year we arrested 4,000 persons, and in 1995 we arrested 700. So it's
that's something manyfold, five, six, seven-fold, and then some.
Yes.
But your staff has not increased.
Well, we've increased some, but you're right in terms of the mission. Our mission now, our priorities are wherever it's possible for us to help the FBI or other federal law enforcement officers. That's where our priority is. Our second priority would be to identify and remove criminal aliens. Last year, our office arrested and removed about 1,000 criminal aliens. 247 of those were convicted drug traffickers. So
that's just in Omaha. I mean, we don't think of Omaha as kind of the Omaha area.
Yes.
And now is that Nebraska, Iowa?
Yes, it's Nebraska and Iowa.
Right.
But in terms of restructuring, I actually think it's going to be a better thing for INS and the American public, because when Congress restructures INS, they're going to have to give us the resources to go along with it, and they're going to have to be able to better focus sort of what priorities they would expect for us to work on.
You know, it was several years ago, the INS office, and you were here then, had what they called Operation Vanguard.
Yes.
And help me if my memory is failing me, because it does more often than not anymore. You went into the meatpacking plants, and they call them raids. You raided to find those that are not working legally in this country. And there was pressure from commercial entities in this state, the meatpacking, and pressure they placed on all the state's congressmen and senators. And they, in turn, then put pressure on you. Now, I know that for a fact, so I'm not asking you to get political in comment. But how does that affect how you plan what you do when you're trying to carry out the mission that's passed by law and in regulations, that everybody knows the rules? People aren't supposed to be working here if they aren't legal.
Yeah. Well, we thought Operation Vanguard made a lot of sense because it was more efficient and a lot more cost-effective than the regular way of doing operations.
Give me a little how one's different than the other.
Yeah, for Operation Vanguard, what we would do is we would take a paper review of all of the employees at a particular plant. If we thought that there were discrepancies, we would ask the plant manager to have those persons available for us to talk to. We really weren't concerned with how many people we arrested at the plant. We were more concerned with making sure that the employees at the plant were here legally and authorized to work. So we didn't really go in and make a lot of arrests. That's not what Vanguard was about. Vanguard was about ensuring that the place of employment has a legal and a stable workforce. So once we realized that we weren't going to be able to implement Operation Vanguard, we simply changed our attention to making criminal cases against employers who are knowingly hiring or harboring or continuing to employ.
Well, that's kind of interesting because it did unsettle the workforce a little, because you did find not humongous numbers, but you find substantial numbers of people that were working there illegally. Now, I know it would depend on the meat packer or any entity that hires uses immigrant help to a large degree. But how easy is it for these employers to document? There are illegal, duplicated, counterfeited. I mean, is there a way to really know when you're hiring?
Well, Carol, I think it was real telling that when we did the review of the I-9s, which is the eligibility of a person to work in the United States, we had some places of employment that less than 5% of their workers we thought had some discrepancies. And yet we had other places where more than 2/3 of their workers had discrepancies. So I myself think that if an employer wants to, he or she can make the conscientious effort and determine if a person is legally in the United States and authorized to work.
And though, let's say the one where they had less than 5%
Yes.
that were illegal, it looked maybe like they made a good faith effort?
Well, not only did they make a good faith effort, but their wages and working conditions were more favorable than those that had a higher percentage of what we thought to be illegal aliens.
You know, that just occurs to me, and if you can't answer this because you
Yeah.
are you're a bureaucrat, and that's not always a bad word, but
Okay.
your job is to carry out the law, not to make comments
Yes.
necessarily on it. But do you ever get a lot of, and I hear this about the immigrant population, that they drive the wages down, and they do this, and they do that, and it takes 2 or 3 or 4 to tango sometimes.
Right.
And what I'm saying is that our state does need immigrant help. And I mean, you ask around, and because there aren't people applying. But sometimes it's because maybe the wages aren't that high. But it isn't a
Yes.
simple answer.
No, it isn't. But we're a nation of laws and we're a nation of immigrants, and I appreciate the fact that we want to continue the tradition that we have as a nation, as a state, to welcome new immigrants. But I would say that those persons should be here lawfully and authorized to work.
There is a move afoot every now and then, and I think we're amidst another one, although I can never quite figure out. They tried to tack something onto a bill that talked about kind of an amnesty kind of thing.
Yes.
There's talk of straightening that situation out somehow to make those who are illegal legal. There are talks about reestablishing a guest worker program for immigrants, and these are generally your Hispanic, Mexican for various jobs, like many of them currently hold. All those things still take people, and would the INS be equipped currently with the people it has to handle something very sudden like that?
No, we wouldn't have the resources that would be required to process, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of persons for lawful status. And I would say, Carol, that our personnel has increased over the last few years, and because of that, even though we've had the big increase in the number of applications, we're able to reduce our processing time so that in 1999, it may have taken us 30 months to process an application for permanent residence, and everyone would say that that's unacceptable. We've been able to reduce that time, so at the end of this fiscal year, our processing for people that apply to become lawful permanent residents will be about 1 year.
You know, there has been complaints, and I know you're aware of them, from particularly the Latino community in town, that you haven't moved fast enough on this, and I'm sure since you're processing people from all over the state, and Iowa, somebody's got to go through all those things, check them out, recheck them. There's all kinds of logistics in the process of one application. A lot of people, though, don't understand exactly what makes you legal to do what.
That's a very good question.
I mean, what makes you legal just to work?
Yes.
What gives you temporary permission to work? What is it called when you want to live here forever?
Yes. Yes. There's basically 4 ways in which people can become lawful permanent residents. One is if a family member that's here in the United States that's either a citizen or a lawful permanent resident files a petition for you. Another is an employment-based petition, which basically is an employer saying, I have a need for a person to work here, and they go through a labor certification process. A third way is a refugee or asylum status, and that is a person who has a well-founded fear of persecution on account of their race, religion, nationality, or membership in a particular social group. And the other way is through a diversity visa lottery, and it's just like it sounds. It's actually a lottery. People put their name in a hat, basically, and 55,000 persons are admitted for permanent residence through a lottery system. Each and every year, the United States admits approximately 1 million persons as lawful permanent residents.
Those are the lawful
Yes.
permanent residents.
Yes. So that there are avenues for people to become permanent residents in a lawful way, and that's what we would propose and offer up, is that there are already avenues and mechanisms in place for people to legalize their status and adjust their status to permanent residence.
You know, we've had amnesties before, and again, I'm not asking for your personal opinion, but do you have some organization that you folks belong to, like the National Association of Immigration, you know, that do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Or a trade that government organization, we don't have a trade organization, but where you talk about, you know, what is really the best way to handle this? If you give amnesties, then they'll just come and wait for the next one. I mean, do you worry about this as a group of administrators and working individuals?
Well, I'm going to be able to bag off that question because,
Okay.
as you had mentioned earlier, our job is to enforce the laws and not to.
Well, I just
place
thought
them.
maybe
Yeah.
you had a group that had an official statement or something. But it is a dilemma that the United States faces.
I think so. Yes, I think we want to, as a nation, we recognize the contributions that generations and generations of immigrants have made to our country, and at the same time, we're a country of laws, and we recognize the importance of enforcing the laws that we have.
And what kind of public policy dilemmas we
Yes.
get in when we do that sort
Yeah.
of thing. You know, there is a group that recently organized to look out for immigrants' rights.
Mm-hmm.
And they hope to network through Nebraska and Iowa and,
Yes.
and some of the region. And has this been an issue? Is there concern growing over immigrants' rights? Does it have anything to do with what you do, or does it have to do more in general how their workplace situations are, whatever? I mean, what's the word?
Yeah, I
you've
would
heard on
think,
this?
Carol, that they're doing a number of initiatives, and I think it's a good thing, first of all, because we certainly want all of our employees, whether you're a customer for naturalization or permanent residence, or you're here in the United States illegally and you're arrested by one of our officers, we want everyone to be treated with respect and dignity. We would probably have a lot more in common with that organization than we do as opposed to opposing interest. A lot of their initiative, I would guess, would be, like you say, worker safety issues, in terms of wages, maybe in terms of unionizing, in terms of what they can or should or should not do with respect to legal issues.
Since you've been here 6.5 years,
Yes.
Something has been added to Omaha, and that's the Mexican consulate.
Yes.
And it serves 4 states. And has that been a good thing?
I think it's been a very good thing. Mr. Cuevas, I know him well. I think he's an outstanding representative for the Mexican government. I think that they are doing a great job with respect to ensuring the rights and helping citizens of Mexico with a variety of administrative issues.
I guess the question I ask, and I guess there's only one prescribed answer, but but in the sense it's a fair question, is it doesn't. Some people may think, well, they're just there to impede what you do. I would assume that the Foreign Service of Mexico
Right.
works very diplomatically and
Yes.
with the INS. I mean, it's just a logical thing. In
Yes.
practicality, is it that way?
In practicality, that is what happens. We've worked with Mr. Cuevas on a number of times when we've done a large enforcement operation, and we've had him come in to speak to the Mexican nationals, and because their number one priority is for the safety and concern and rights that Mexican nationals have. And so we would welcome him to come in when we're processing people to ensure that their rights and obligations are met.
In a way, that just covers your buns, in a way,
You're
because
right.
there's always someone that can turn around and make accusations.
You're right, but we have worked with him on a number of cases. Sometimes he has situations where he wants to be able to extend some sort of maybe a temporary immigration benefit to a Mexican national based on maybe a circumstance of someone being in a hospital. He'd like for us, our assistance, to help that person enter the United States. There's some situations that we work very closely with one another.
Where there's a little leeway, as
Yes.
long as you can feel you can follow the law and the regulations.
Yeah.
And so there is a human element.
Very much so.
And I think some people don't think of that it's all cut and dried on every portion, every way through. I mean, like you said, if someone's in the hospital and they have a relative that you're going to deport, perhaps there's a little time there when they don't look like a flight risk or something.
Right, and then there's also been times when he and I have been on a panel of, and we've talked. We might have disagreements on some issues, but it's a good exchange, and it's a way to sort of inform and educate whatever the public is that's at the audience.
Of course, we talk about Mexicans a lot in Nebraska because we have meat packing and some of the industries that tend to attract, you know, from directly south of the border. And those long borders, both the one to our south and the north,
Yes.
you don't deal with them directly. In other words, you're not next to the border.
Right.
But again, talking amongst yourselves with immigration people,
Yes.
those two borders, Canada and Mexico, seem to be not an insurmountable problem, but you can reorganize and
Yes.
do everything all you want to the INS, and that's still going to be
You're
scary.
right. It's a 1,900-mile border with Mexico and about a 4,000-mile border with Canada. And I think one of the things, Carol, that INS has been moving to is to have more of a deterrence overseas, to sort of identify persons prior to their ever getting here. And whether that's working with host governments or airline security personnel at foreign airports, or working more closely with the Mexican and the Canadian governments.
I was listening to 60 Minutes, one of those week 60 Minutes, not the
Yes.
Sunday one. And one of the things they talked about was that certain things had been identified about some of the people that ended up involved in the 911 or planning
Yes.
that, or the fellow that tried to bring the explosives over the border from Canada
Yes.
to blow up the LA airport, that there was you know, knowledge about them, and that Canada had failed to act on one thing, and the French intelligence had given us some stuff and we didn't get it. Not to lay any blame, but
Yeah.
do you think that the international cooperation has to become a little more streamlined, if nothing else?
Well, I think it certainly has since 9/11. And I think both the federal government agencies that had access to their own databases were much more sharing of that information, and that's very important. And as well as from government to government perspective, there's a lot more of that sharing of intelligence.
And your brethren in the Department of Justice, the FBI, certainly come under a lot of scrutiny too. In fact, in some ways more than you all. So at least you're not the only one. But this is a huge, between the CIA, the FBI, the INS, all these kinds of things. We're talking about something that's not going to be solved overnight.
You're exactly right. And also when you had alluded to the fact that Congress and you know, I think with restructuring of INS as well as to all the federal law enforcement agencies, you know, Congress is going to have more of a sense of responsibility with respect to ensuring that federal law enforcement agencies have the resources that they need to do the job.
And then there's all this mapping out of duplication of services and everything, which might be more between the CIA and the FBI and some local law enforcement. But the INS is still going to have to, I mean, who does what, when,
Yes.
and what's the most efficient way to do it?
And I think that's good for the government and American people and Congress to take a look at that, and where there's duplicity, to eliminate that.
When people ask you about your job, what's the most commonly asked question, or what do they ask you? They ask you for help, or?
Yeah, I have people that ask me about particular situations, but I think people are overwhelmingly interested in what it is that INS does, and I think they have a good appreciation for the fact that we have dual missions, and there's a lot of things that are involved in making decisions, whether it's on an enforcement side or service side.
One of the things that came out of 9/11 certainly was accounting for students that come in.
Yes.
And at last count, I think you kind of can't account for almost 600 students in Nebraska, maybe 550 or so students in Nebraska and Iowa.
Yes.
How nationally, from the guys on top,
Yes.
gals on top,
Yeah.
where are they figuring out a better way to handle this situation?
Yes, there's a new system that's called the Student Exchange Visitor Information System that's going to be up and running the first part of the new fiscal year, which is October 1st. And INS is working very closely with the universities and with the State Department, with the other agencies to make sure that it's a system that's going to be very, very user-friendly and very, very thorough. So we're going to have, as an agency and as a country, we're going to have much better access to information instantaneously.
Well, universities being what they are and privacy being what it is, have the universities as a group been able to strike a chord where everybody is on the same page and doesn't feel anybody's rights are being violated?
Well, I think so, Carol. With respect to the query,
There was some concern.
Yeah, when we sent out the request for information to the local universities, overwhelmingly they responded in a very positive manner, and they did so expeditiously.
are there any other areas like that, for instance, when people come in as a, I forget the term you used, where a corporation sponsors them or they need a certain type of worker,
Yeah.
and that's one of the routes that you can be legally working in this country. Do you follow up on them too to make sure they indeed are working?
No, once they come in, if they come in based on an employment-based petition, they're lawfully admitted to the United States and they're permanent residents forever. And the only way that we would do a follow-up would be if somehow we got information that it was a fraudulent offer or that they immediately left the place of employment.
It was a sham
Yeah.
of some
Yeah.
sort. It's like marrying.
Yes, exactly.
The marrying situation when someone
Yes.
marries just to get in. Do migrant workers, are there special situations for, I know California is one,
Yes.
is a state where they desperately, I mean, when the harvest is ready, they need it, and
Yes.
they, you know, immigrants come and they do this sort of on an annual basis, and most of them are from Mexico or thereabouts. Is that a system that's pretty streamlined now?
Yeah, I think that system works well. For an employer to participate in that program, they have to show that the work is seasonal and temporary in nature. And they have to have certain Department of Labor requirements that they have to meet to make sure that the wages that they're being paid are usual and customary and above minimum wage. I think that system works fairly well.
And I suppose there's some checks and balances with unions kind of keeping tabs on those
Yes.
things and making sure. I understand housing is always a concern, but that's not your concern. But
Right.
how they're treated, sort of when they're here, that it's at least decent.
Yeah, and I think it should be. I think that the American public would demand that the conditions are acceptable and the housing is acceptable.
Okay, now this is a tricky question. We have a minute left, and I
Okay.
don't mean to be tricky. But if you were the immigration guru of the
Yes.
world, what would be one change you would make?
I think I would look at why is it that people come to the United States, and overwhelmingly the answer is to work. So I would think that maybe as a nation we should maybe look at what can we do with different countries' infrastructure to keep people in their respective country, because for the most part they're only coming here to work.
But at the same time, we need certain workers, so we have a lot to plan on, long-term planning.
Right.
Okay, I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank
Jerry
you.
Hightower, District Director of the Omaha Office of the Immigration and Naturalization Service. And thank you for joining us this week on Consider This. A reminder that you can see this show streamed on the internet. Just go to unotv.unomaha.edu or check out our past shows. Again, thanks for joining us. Have a great day.
This program is made possible in part by Nebraskans for Public Television.